Welcome to this explainer. Pull up a chair, settle in, and listen close. I've lived long enough to see a whole lot of giants stumble, but the story we're looking at today, the fall of the Schwinn Empire, well, it's a real masterclass in how pride can just completely silence an entire dynasty. We're going to look closely at how America's greatest two-wheeled empire was built from the dirt up, dominated the landscape, and then completely destroyed itself.
25%. I want you to really think about that number for a second. Back in the golden era of the 1960s, 1 out of every 4 bicycles sold in America had the name Schwinn stamped right there on its chrome handlebars. You could walk down literally any suburban street, look in any driveway from Connecticut to California, and you'd see them. They weren't just a company, they defined an entire generation's childhood. So how in the world do you go from owning a quarter of the entire market to drowning in debt? Let's get into it.
Section 1, the American Bicycle Dream. Now, to understand the fall, you gotta understand the pure grit of the foundation. And this all starts with a fella named Ignaz Schwinn. Orphaned over in Germany at just 11 years old, he was shipped off to a mechanical trade school, basically just so he wouldn't starve to death. By 1891, he hit Chicago, which was pretty much the Wild West of manufacturing back then, with almost no English but a head absolutely full of engineering brilliance. He refused to just make other men rich. So by 1895, he partners up with a wealthy meatpacker to found Arnold Schwinn and Company. And by 1908, he buys him out entirely to become the sole owner. He built this whole thing from the frozen ground up. You see, in the 1890s, Chicago was experiencing a massive bicycle gold rush. We're talking over 300 manufacturers scrambling for a quick buck. But Ignaz, well, he knew something they didn't. You don't survive a gold rush by digging for gold. You survive it by selling shovels. And, crucially, only if your shovels never break. While everyone else was cutting corners, he was literally obsessing, over weld quality and frame geometry. When that bubble finally popped and those 300 competitors went bankrupt, Schwinn was left standing. Plain and simple, because they built things to actually last. Section 2, Forging the Empire. Now, surviving those early days was one thing, sure, but 1931 brought the Great Depression, the absolute ultimate survival test. Actually, Schwinn had a massive, highly profitable motorcycle division at the time. They were the 3rd largest in America, if you can believe it. But Ignaz looked at the board and made a brutally visionary choice. Motorcycles, they were a luxury. Bicycles, those were essential, cheap transport for struggling working families. So he killed the profitable motorcycle division entirely, overnight, just to save the essential bicycle business. It was a painful amputation, sure, but it saved the patient's life. And that ruthless focus, it really paid off when his son, Frank W. Schwinn, took the reins. Frank brought that aggressive, heavy-duty motorcycle attitude right back into the bicycle division. Back then, narrow tires on rough, unpaved streets would literally rattle your teeth loose. So Frank pitches this wild idea to American Rubber: build a wide, 2.125-inch cushioned tire. Step by step, this innovation gave birth to the famous balloon tire cruiser. It completely revolutionized childhood comfort and gave kids a bike that looked, well, kind of like a miniature motorcycle. Section 3, the Stingray Golden Age. To reach that absolute untouchable peak, Frank made an almost unthinkable gamble. He flat out refused to sell his bikes to big department stores like Sears or JCPenney. No private labels, no sir. Independent shops only. If you wanted a Schwinn, you had to go to an exclusive Schwinn dealer. It was brilliant, really. It protected their pricing power, guaranteed obsessive quality control, and created this fiercely loyal dealer network. When you control the distribution, you control your destiny.
Ah, man, the crate series. The orange crate, the lemon peeler, the apple crate. In the 60s, Schwinn noticed kids out in California chopping up their bikes to look like motorcycles, and instead of just ignoring it, they mass-produced it. The Stingray, and specifically this extravagant drag racing-inspired crate series with the stick shifts and those iconic banana seats, it became the ultimate 1960s status symbol. Literally every kid on the block begged their parents for one of these things. 2 million. That is how many Stingrays rolled out in just 5 years, between 1963 and 1968. I mean, that's sheer cultural dominance. They didn't just make bikes, they defined exactly what an American childhood looked like. They were firing on all cylinders: design, marketing, manufacturing. It was a perfectly oiled machine.
Section 4, Missing the Revolution. But, as we all know, seasons change, my friends. And arrogance? Arrogance is a heavy anchor. Moving into the 70s and 80s, the culture shifted right under their feet.
Kids wanted BMX bikes to race in the dirt. Schwinn called it a fad and basically handed the market over to Mongoose. Adults wanted mountain bikes to ride off-road. Schwinn's engineers literally laughed at the concept, leaving the door wide open for Specialized. And fitness enthusiasts? They wanted lightweight road bikes, but Schwinn just kept building these heavy tanks, while Trek swooped in and took the premium adult market. They dismissed 3 massive, culture-shifting movements just because it didn't fit their traditional image. Unbelievable.
At the helm during this storm was Edward Schwinn Jr., Ignaz's great-grandson. Now, he was a man who chased deals over operations. He completely lacked the iron discipline of the men who actually built the company. He alienated his experienced managers and drove top executive talent right out the front door, straight into the arms of competitors like Trek and Specialized, handing over decades of priceless institutional knowledge. It just goes to show you, a legacy name doesn't guarantee competent leadership.
Section 5. The Silent Factory.
Those cracks finally gave way to total collapse in the 1980s. See, the original Chicago plant was outdated, yeah, but the workforce there had decades of real hard-earned skill. Instead of fixing it, management shut it down in '83 and built a brand new factory in Greenville, Mississippi. Now, why on earth do that? Well, it was union-free, and it was cheap, but it was an absolute logistical nightmare. It was 75 miles from an interstate highway. They had to train a workforce from absolute scratch. They fought basic geography and economics, basically trying to win on nostalgia instead of actual innovation. And the fallout? Catastrophic. Just look at the numbers. In 1987, they sold 1 million bicycles. By 1991, that was sliced right in half, down to 500,000. And by 1993, barely 275,000. They lost over 70% of their volume in just 6 years. Greenville never turned a single dime of profit. The lifeblood was just rapidly draining out of the empire. So because their own factories were failing so miserably, Schwinn made their final fatal error. They outsourced. By 1988, 82% of Schwinn's bicycles were being built by a single supplier over in Taiwan, Giant Manufacturing. Schwinn became completely dependent on them. Soon enough, Giant wasn't just their manufacturer anymore, they became their biggest creditor, and eventually, their direct competitor. Schwinn literally just handed over the keys to their own kingdom. $82 million in debt. Let that sink in. By 1992, they were bleeding $2 million every single month. Suppliers demanded cash up front, the bank severely tightened the noose, and finally, on October 7, 1992, Schwinn filed for bankruptcy. 97 years of proud family ownership, a legacy that survived the Great Depression and 2 world wars, just entirely wiped out. Today, that Greenville factory just sits there empty, overgrown with weeds, the machines completely silent. It's a haunting monument to what happens when you ignore a changing market. You see, the silent factory doesn't just represent Schwinn's failure. It represents every business, every empire that thought it was simply too big to fail. Blinded by their own legacy, they just couldn't see tomorrow's revolution coming. So I'm going to leave you with a question, one that really should keep you awake at night, whether you're running a business or just steering your own life. Are you relying way too much on yesterday's glory to save tomorrow? The market, it doesn't care what you built in the past. It only cares what you're building today. Adapt or die. Innovate or fade into silence. Well, thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open, and I'll see you next time.